I had to pull out of the Blues Brothers to stay with Gilda and finish that project. And I had put together the whole band with John.
Yeah.
Oh, it just killed me. Maybe the 30s. Just the simple three chords of rock and roll, they sound like the world, the secrets of the world are in there somewhere when you're just hearing them for the first time.
Like your hormones in your ears are connected in some way.
I think I've never heard it put better.
You're never going to be perfectly happy all the time. The best you can hope for is to be reasonably happy. Most of the time.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Reasonably Happy. I am Paul Ollinger, and I'm thrilled to welcome somebody I've been watching for 5 decades or so, 4.5 decades, probably.
Well, don't rub it in.
The great Paul Shaffer, musical director, longtime musical director of The Late Show with David Letterman.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Musicologist? What was your title on SNL?
Yeah, well, on SNL, we were trying to be, new and not like I'm talking about the original 5 years. That was
Like
my
74,
era.
75.
Yeah, we don't want to be like your average primetime variety show. Everything was not primetime, not ready for primetime. And we used to say, what do you think about that piece of it? To Carol Burnett was a sort of a short film.
Carol Burnett was pretty damn good.
So, of course, she was good.
But it was more down the middle.
That's, I guess, was the idea, yeah. So when I was going to get a credit on the show, well, I was just thrilled about it. But and the traditional credit would have been something that people don't even remember this. People in the business, people on Saturday Night Live now. I always ask them something just for the hell. Have you ever heard of a person who writes special musical material? No, what does that mean? Special material? You don't know what? In the days of Carol Burnett and before, like for instance, if Liza Minnelli would need an opening number, she had her two guys, Candor and Ebb were their names, and she would ask for something. They'd whip her up a number like Liza with a Z, and she'd have her opening number, and that was called. They wrote her a piece of special material. Mm-hmm. So, but special material is my credit to Carol Burnett. So I thought, well, how about musical stylings? It'll be sort of ironic, And my mother said, well, it sounds like you're doing their hair. So I had to go with special musical material.
There you go.
Yeah, but not musical stylings.
Well, I wanted to start with, since our theme is happiness and fulfillment, what's a song where if you're in a bad mood, if you put that song on, it turns your day around?
Well, I think that it's the same answer to what's your favorite song of all time, and I always answer, certainly of the rock and roll era, My Girl by The Temptations. Okay. That's the song that makes me happy.
How old were you when that came out?
Well, I would have been about 15, I guess. Maybe it came out in 65. Mm-hmm. Or maybe 66, 7. So, I was 16, something like that. And it's still today, I still feel that it's the best song. Yeah, best record and song, best performance, lead vocal. David Ruffin, one of the great of all time of some of the Temptations. Best backgrounds, arrangement. Smokey Robinson wrote it. Mm-hmm. I mean, it just has everything. And I listen intently every time. I never take it off if it comes on.
Do you hear something new every time you listen?
I pretty much know it, but no, I think the answer is yeah. Of course I do. Yeah. I gain a new appreciation of it somewhere. And you can't stay sad if if you're doing that. Just appreciating every little twist and turn of it,
What if your girl just left you? Is My Girl a good song to listen to?
Yeah, it doesn't sound like it would be appropriate, but I could still dig the arrangement.
There you go. Do you listen? Are you a Spotify user by any chance?
No, not really.
So they just came out with the year-end Wrapped list.
Yeah, I've been noticing everybody's so proud of it.
So I'm 55 years old, and everything that's on my list came out between like 1977 and 1986.
Okay, yeah.
And you mentioned something that came out when you were 15. What is it about the music we hear when we're awakening that sticks with us?
Oh, I don't know. I think that's sort of how it works. Even my parents and their, when they were into Sinatra, they were Bobby Soxers. He was a teen idol. Yeah. Even Sinatra. Somehow it hits you when you're just, when a guy's just learning about girls. Mm-hmm. and you're just hearing these things for the first time. You know, the simple three chords of rock and roll, they sound like the world, the secrets of the world are in there somewhere when you're just hearing them for the first time.
Like your hormones in your ears are connected in some way.
I think I've never heard it put better.
Well, there you go. All right. So let's go back to your pubescent days in Thunder Bay, Ontario, on the shores of Gitchigumi.
On the shores of the big Lake Superior.
Yeah.
Which is as big as an ocean, really, that lake. And so it's always cloudy. It's like, remember Little Abner? You're probably too young to remember that comic strip. But there was a guy in there whose luck was so bad that he walked around under his own rain cloud.
Black cloud, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the way it was up there. That cloud was always there.
Tell me about what you played at your bar mitzvah.
What I played?
Did you not play a special song at your bar mitzvah?
I'm sure there's a story in there somewhere.
I'm pulling. I should have.
I certainly.
Maybe you didn't play it at your bar mitzvah, but there was
certainly the Jewish community. There was only one synagogue in town, and I was sent there for my Hebrew education, and it was Orthodox. So I'm kind of legit in that area. I can do the.
You didn't half-ass it.
I can do the Friday night service. I don't know about it anymore. But it was also a place where they might have a talent night and kids would be performing for their parents, and that crowd. And there was, I remember, there was a kid only 1 year older than I, but he way better on piano than I ever dreamed of being. And he every year at this talent show, he just massacred me. I'd play a little piece of Mozart from my lesson or something, and he could play this song from that era, Jealousy, actually, earlier than maybe the 30s. This is like 12-year-old kid could do that,
Yeah.
Until the movie Exodus came out.
Based on the novel by Leon Uris.
Yes, about the I guess state of Israel gaining its independence. And a beautiful theme by Ernest Gold, the movie writer, whose son happens to be Andrew Gold, rock musician, who was Linda Ronstadt's band leader for years, and
cool.
had his own beautiful hit song called "Lonely Boy." Anyway, I learned how to play Exodus, and it was just a killer.
You brought the house
Slade.
down.
I wiped this other kid out.
Was it cheating choosing that piece of music?
Well, it taught me a lot of things. Right? Number one, I never became a songwriter, partly because of that. You choose the right piece of music, it's all you need. And I guess the other reason is because that band from the 60s and 70s, rock band called the Guess Who.
Yeah.
From Winnipeg, Manitoba, the next town over from where I was. Before they had their own hits, they went back and forth across Canada touring. They were just kids. But with doing just covers, they were so good that if they covered the Beatles, they sounded like the Beatles.
Wow.
If they covered Georgie Fame, they sounded like, and this was a perfectly satisfying evening to me to see the Guess Who. They were killers and they didn't have their own material. So I just thought, well, that's what you do, I guess, and I think it stayed with me. I just like playing songs that I love.
Your parents were super hip. Like, you saw a lot of stuff as a kid
Isn't that
most
funny
adults
how, yes.
have never even had the exposure to.
They loved show business, and they were certainly hip to show business, and they, of course, the Ed Sullivan Show, so iconic at the time when I was a child, and the time when the whole family, 8 o'clock Sunday night, whole family would watch TV together, and it was a variety show, and he introduced the Beatles. That's the main, his main impact. But my parents just knew all the different people that he would show old vaudevillians, old British music hall performers like Tessie O'Shea and stuff. I grew up knowing who these people were.
Tessie O'Shea.
Tessie O'Shea.
I was going to wear my Tessie O'Shea T-shirt today, but
but certainly my dad taught me a few things by watching the Ed Sullivan Show. He taught me how to recognize a good toupee versus a not so good.
Yeah.
Tony Randall, for instance. Great toupee. Most people didn't even know that he wore a toupee.
Right.
Tony Bennett, terrible.
Not so good.
Terrible. Looked like a rug.
Great voice, though.
Great singer. I've heard it said that he was a pothead from the jazz age.
Really?
Tony Bennett.
Really?
Yeah, going back to
He left his weed in San Francisco.
That going through the customs, he would put his weed under his tube, stash it under there.
I read your memoir. This is how I picked it up. It was fast. I love reading. Like I read Ed Begley Jr.'s memoir last year. I love hearing these Hollywood stories, the entertainment I grew up watching, and hearing the backstory on it. And you're there for all of it, And I realized as I'm listening to it that I discovered you in reverse. That the first time I saw you was as Letterman's musical director and sidekick. Okay, so that's like 82 for me.
Right.
I'm 12, 13. But then I'm watching reruns of SNL, and there you are backing up Bill Murray as Nick the Lounge Singer, singing Star Wars. I'm not going to do it.
Thank you. One of my hits.
Did you write or did you adapt all that stuff?
I collaborated on Star Wars, lyrics of Star Wars. We had a team of about 5 of us, Billy being one of them, Aykroyd another, and Tom Davis of Frank and David. People got together. Marilyn Suzanne Miller was another. And we would write these things together. But Billy always knew the songs that he wanted to do, what songs he could make funny. And Star Wars was, everybody, in 1977, it's all anybody could talk about.
Right.
Especially, and I was a studio musician at the time. Mm-hmm. In the studios, everybody was talking about the movie, did you see Star Wars? And all the musicians, how about that bar, the band in the Star Wars bar, So that was the bridge. Bar. How about that Star Wars bar,
I watched one the other day, and I was just laughing because it's just such a fun piece with him being him. But it's the music that makes that work so well, So fill in the gap between you in high school and how you got into this groove of all these amazingly talented people in early 70s Toronto. So but first you were on the path to become a lawyer potentially.
Or something. And my parents would have been happy with any real profession. Yet secretly they loved show business. That was that strange duality.
Yeah.
So their fantasy was that I might go into show biz, but but more grounded. You got to have an education. You got to have a profession.
Yeah.
In college, I went to University of Toronto, and it was there that I realized I had to at least try music. Nothing else interested me. I was so depressed all the time until I started playing in a little avant-garde jazz group up there, and I cheered up, and it was just obvious that I should just take my degree after 3 years, which you could do at that time, because there were 13 years of high school. Mm. So I took a 3-year degree in sociology and just started playing gigs, see what happens.
But so before you started playing, you said you were depressed before you started playing. Was it because you weren't able to express something that was inside of you?
It was just clear as day. I had had a little high school rock band, and that was kind of and just a cover band, nowhere near as the Guess Who, as good as that covering, but it still was my identity, and it gave me an outlet to play and to perform, and I gave it up, and I was going to become an academic. And all I wanted to do was sleep. Except that I was finally in a real city of Toronto, Thunder Bay, no offense, 100,000 people or so, 140,000, I think, when I was there, but very isolated and isolated mentality. Toronto, a brand new rock club opened. Blood, Sweat, and Tears played the opening weekend, my first weekend in college. Man, I saw all 4 shows.
Wow.
Of BS&T, and started saying jazz rock. Boy, that's kind of interesting. And then, but I said, if it doesn't work out in a year, I'll go to grad school. I didn't know. I think maybe a college professor. I might have ended up that way. But just before the year ended, one of the things I used to do also for bread was I would accompany performers, friends of mine, who going to audition for shows. Mm-hmm. And this show from 1972, New York off-Broadway, called Godspell, a rock musical about Jesus and his disciples.
We need an Orthodox Jew on the keys. That's what we need here. Written by, of course.
All the Jews wrote this thing. They developed it in Carnegie at Mellon University, apparently, and it was the guy who developed it as his thesis, John Michael Tebelak, no Jewish blood there. But they got Stephen Schwartz, who, of course, the biggest thing in show business
still
Wicked.
Today. Yeah.
Wicked is, ridiculously over the top now. But this was his first show, Godspell. He had a big hit in New York. He was casting a company up in Toronto. I went with a girl who was going to sing a song from the show, and I accompanied her, and after I played it, he said, I want to talk to that piano player. And he hired me that day, based on how I played his song, I think. And then he said, you got to come to New York and play on the movie soundtrack. That was my first time in New York, in a real New York studio, where they had a direct line to the kosher deli from the studio. I said, I've made it.
There you are.
Yeah.
So who's in that cast of Godspell?
Well, this one, Schwartz, what a cast he put together. Besides hiring me to play the piano, Victor Garber was our Jesus. He, the leader and is sort of the head of the whole ensemble. Victor went on to star in Titanic and in that show Alias with Jennifer Garner. Martin Short, the funniest stuff for my money. Eugene Levy, now becoming
he's as big now as he's ever been.
Superstar that he's always should have been. Andrea Martin, who taught them all how to be funny. I swear to God, she was hilarious back then. Nobody had seen anything like it. She was from the U.S., actually, from Maine, but followed a boyfriend up there or something. Gilda Radner, same thing, from Detroit, Michigan, ended up doing theater in Toronto. All these people were in this show, and we all became fast friends, and we all still, those of us still living. Gilda's gone, sadly, but we're all still best of friends.
How do you think that pocket of talent came together?
I certainly think that Stephen Schwartz had an eye for talent, and that Godspell was a kind of a show where talented, funny kids could use those talents. It was kind of free. You could put your own bits in. You could put your own impressions in. As they told the parables of Jesus and stuff, they were doing it as Groucho and things like that.
Amazing.
So he just put together the most talented kids of a certain age. I don't know what the casting call would have said, 18 to 25 or something. Everybody came out in a town like Toronto. If there was a New York show, everybody in that age bracket came out, and so he saw everybody. Schwartz saw everybody in town and just picked the most talented, and sure enough, he did.
And when you're accompanying in the audition, he doesn't know that you've got. He might see the passion you have for the music, but he doesn't know that you've got real comedy chops. That there's more to you than just some guy who knows how to.
Well, what? I'm so thrilled to hear you say I have comedy chops, but I guess I did. I learned how to read lines, and yes, every night with Letterman, you got to pick up something.
You don't, but you have to be able to take all those songs and make them funny for Bill Murray and to, be the musical director for the Blues Brothers. Those aren't just music. That's like comedy performance.
Well, I gravitated to comedy. First of all, I get it. My first professional job is this Toronto show of Godspell, and there's all these people that I didn't know it at the time, but they're not going to get any more talented than that, and it really did change my life. I looked at Marty and Eugene, who were best friends. They lived together.
God, can you imagine?
And I just said, first of all, they're always on. Not so much Eugene, but certainly Marty. And they seem to be having more fun than I am in their lives. Let me be a little more like that. I really did consciously say that to myself. And I started hanging with, I was drawn to them, and they accepted me, nicely enough, and we hung all the time.
So you ran with that Second City gang in Toronto.
Second City came later, while we were already doing Godspell. Two guys from Chicago, one the late Joe Flaherty, we just lost. He had been in SCTV. Brian Doyle Murray, the older brother of Bill, came up to Toronto from Chicago to open a nightclub up there where they were going to do the Second City show. They were going to cast it, these two boys and local performers, and teach them how to do the improv comedy that Second City did. And they raided our Godspell show, and they hired they hired Eugene, and they hired, who else? Gilda. Danny Aykroyd was not in Godspell, but was around all the time.
He was young.
He was in the show. Yeah, a little younger than the rest of us, yes. So I don't know. I've bored myself and lost my train of thought. But I gravitated to them, and we hung incessantly. We talked about our Godspell show and every other aspect of show business all the time. Just laughing all the time. And yes, changed my life. So that when I got into SNL, because a bunch of Canadians came down to town to do it.
Including the chief Canadian, right?
Yeah, Lorne Michaels, Canadian. His best friend, Howard Shore, was his musical director. I had just met Howard in Toronto, and we hit it off, but I was in Toronto I was already in New York working for Steve Schwartz, and I got the call. We're starting this new show. It's going to be live. And I was dying to get on camera. I was, I had gotten the sickness already, and just was trying, how am I going to get this face on that camera? That really became a sort of a mandate for me.
And how did it manifest the first time?
Well, the very first time, Brian Doyle Murray had come aboard as a writer.
On SNL?
On SNL,
Okay.
yes.
Before Bill was even on the show?
After Bill was on the show.
Okay.
Bill was still on it. Brian was now writing for it. Brian wrote a piece for the very talented Garrett Morris.
Yeah. Who's a big singer also, right?
He could do anything, including a hell of a Tina Turner in drag. And this was Brian's bit that he devised. There was another character around who was also a writer, but a kind of a morbid. His character was a sort of an evil, morbid guy, Michael O'Donoghue. And the morbid character that he would sometimes do on camera, Mr. Mike. So Brian had the idea, well, say it's instead of Ike and Tina, what if it's Mr. Mike and Tina is Garrett. And but we need somehow, how are we going to set this up? We need some exposition. And I said, well, I have an impression I can do of this guy, Don Kirshner, the rock impresario who had his own show at the time. First live rock concert on TV, Don Kirshner's rock concert. I could introduce Garrett as Don Kirshner, and that was really the first time I read lines on TV. And it was funny. So I got to do it again.
And we'll come back to Saturday Night Live, but so Don Kirshner became the basis for we'll call it a cameo in one of my favorite movies of all time. This is Spinal Tap, where you played Artie Fufkin of Polymer Records.
Yes, thank you again. One of my hits. Not easy to bust me on that, but the truth is, I really hadn't done much acting.
Yeah,
and not only that, but they didn't write anything for you in Spinal Tap.
You just showed up in improv.
You gotta make up your own lines. Now, it wasn't
with some of the greatest improvers anywhere.
Now, it wasn't strictly improv because people were making them up, at home the night before and planning what they might say, but they weren't going to say it until we were rolling. So things were just being said that were so funny that we would be laughing in the take, but Rob Reiner would say, well, it's all right. You'd laugh if somebody says that. Let's go again. And that's kind of how he did it. Got a couple of takes, and then he'd pick the funny stuff. So all I could really fall back on was my Don Kirshner. It was the only character I knew, so I just started talking like him again. And that's the backstory of that character.
Oh, it's so fun. That movie is such an amazing piece of work. What? How did you and Dave hook up?
Well, right after my 5 years was over on SNL, and everybody was leaving. Lauren was leaving, couldn't make a deal. Our whole cast left with him, and I was leaving too. I couldn't see staying around for a brand new cast. It just didn't seem, I had places to go. And I was asked, actually, by Gene Domanian if I wanted to take over the band and stuff. But I just thought, when you're young, you don't realize how important a gig, can be. I turned it down, and then I got a call. Dave Letterman, not so well known at the time. I had heard of him, but didn't really know him. He's getting a show on NBC live in the morning, actually live. And would you be the band leader? And I just, I don't know, after 5 years of SNL, Dave still kids me about it. He says, you couldn't get up that early. Isn't that right? And well, that's really the reason. But I passed on that. And then I started watching it, and it was just hilarious, especially after they got canceled. They got canceled and had to do a month's more shows. And boy, they got funny then, because they just
Had nothing to lose.
Did not give a damn. But that show didn't last, but they kept him, and they gave him another show, and I got another call 2 years later. Now he's going on after Johnny Carson, 12:30 at night. Really? After Johnny? Even later? I said to myself, well, that's for me. That sounds like my style. And I went in and had a meeting with Dave, and we hit it off. And he mentioned, he said, I would see you doing that stuff with Bill Murray. That's what he mentioned, where he noticed me. So that's how we hooked up.
Interesting. Yeah. And you get the opportunity, you've done this several times in your career, to put bands together. Mm-hmm. What is the chemistry you're looking for when you're choosing each member of a band?
Well, yes, I've gotten to do it a couple of times that were successful. So every time is going to be different. Yes, a lot is said about people got to get along, they got to gel on the road and stuff. I guess I never gave a damn about that. Thinking about the Blues Brothers, which I got to put together with John Belushi, musician by musician, sort of like the way they did it in the movie, each guy hiring,
Yeah.
And that's how we did it. And it was just, in that case, they were so hot, John and Danny, that everybody wanted to play for them. And I just got the vibe we could get a really authentic band here with some of the classic guys maybe that invented some of this music.
The studio guys.
For instance, our guitar player, Matt Guitar Murphy, the great Chicago blues player who played with Little Walter and you name it, so many sessions at Chess Records, and played with all of the greats, you name it, Bo Diddley and John Lee Hooker. And he was recommended to us one night, late at night. I mean, the story of putting together that band is almost as entertaining as the movie was.
Yeah.
But in the case of Matt Murphy, John kind of saw himself as the next Mick Jagger, who could blame him? All of a sudden he's got a record deal, he's a comic, but he could sing a little bit, and he had some rock and roll experience from high school. It's really all he had going for him. Aykroyd could play some decent harmonica, though. He loved the blues up in Canada. But John, as Mick, he thought he was, who's going to be my guitar player? Who are we going to get? And he's hanging out with rock stars because he's John Belushi, and they've all got suggestions for him. Hire this person, hire that person. We're getting letters, even from the great Mike Bloomfield. I'll never forget it. I was such a fan of his, from the original Paul Butterfield band.
Oh, wow.
I want to play for you guys.
Yeah.
John said, no, I don't don't exactly know why. But some musician friends of his said, hire this hot guy from L.A., the L.A. studio scene. I said, John, I think we can do better. And John is so frustrated. He said, it's like 2 a.m. He says, we got to go see Doc. I said, what? What are you talking? Doc Pomus, the great old songwriter that I was, of course, familiar with. He had wrote Save the Last Dance for Me, among other wonderful hits, Little Sister for Elvis and stuff. Doc will know. And Doc, we locate him. He's at a jam session at Kenny's Castaways nightclub, 2 a.m. And we find him there. He's in a wheelchair. He's infirmed. He says, what can I do for you? And we explain, we're putting together, we got a record deal, putting together a blues band, and we need a lead player. And Doc just kind of thinks, he says, Matt Murphy's your man. Simple as that. And John is like, Chomp, can we hire him? Can we hire him? I said, well, so he's like a blues player like we know, a classic blues lead player. That's right. I said, okay, John, we can hire him tonight, but you got to promise me we can have a rhythm guitar player too. Often those guys don't specialize in rhythm. They specialize in lead and licks and blues and stuff. If we can have a second guitar player, okay. And we hired him that very night. And that's how Matt Murphy got in the band. And then Tom Malone, my dear friend on trombone, who was in the band too, and also with me on Letterman, said, I think we can get Steve Cropper and Duck Dunn, from the great Booker T and the MGs, who played for Otis Redding and Sam and Dave and you name it.
Those guys actually played on the original recording of Soul Man.
On the original, yes.
And that was the biggest hit for the Blues Brothers, it ended up being.
Well, that's right. When they came into the band, they took a listen to this blues stuff that we were doing, and they said, geez, we need some hits.
Right. You got to make it easy for these people that haven't heard this kind of music delivered the way it was.
And so it was the two of them who said, Soul Man, let's do Soul Man. John didn't really know it, but they taught him how to sing it.
Yeah.
And that's how we ended up doing that. And that's how the Blues Brothers became more of an R&B review rather than just a straight blues, B.B. King style thing that we were going to do.
You had to make some tough choices around the Blues Brothers and Gilda.
Well, that's really the crux of one of the worst professional situations I ever got myself into. Because Gilda Radner got a record deal too, and I and my co-producer on, he was a producer, I was a musical director, on that first Blues Brothers album, his name was Bob Tischler. Now we're asked by Lorne, Gilda's mentor, do a record for Gilda now, and Belushi said, don't do it, because we're going to be doing a movie. Rest up for the movie. And I said, John, I gotta, how can I? It's Gilda. I know her from Toronto. So of course I did that. And Tischler and I somehow our deadline, loomed. We didn't get finished in time. I had to pull out of the Blues Brothers to stay with Gilda and finish that project. And I had put together the whole band with John. Yeah. Oh, it just killed me. But thanks to Danny.
But you were loyal to your friend Gilda.
I just had,
If you had walked away from her, you'd probably regret that to this day.
Yeah, that's right. I wouldn't be able to. I had to do it that way, and I think even John understood, because initially there was a big feud. I don't know how. There was no Twitter or anything at that time, but somehow he released, among our group, he released his own press release. Paul Shaffer is out. He will never be a blues brother. Oh, I was just...
It must have hurt.
Devastated, but somehow there was a big reunion, and John and I reconciled, and I rejoined the Blues Brothers for the big tour.
Do you think that decision, the character to make that decision, is one of the things that's contributed to your longevity in the business?
Oh, it's a sweet idea. I hope so. I hope you're right about that. But even a guy who you so generously say, made the right decision, I look back now and think about the ones that I didn't make such a great decision.
What was number two? If not being a blues brother, that's a pretty. I can see how that would.
I mean, you forget to call somebody, or just every day. Really, you are on. You got to be on.
Yeah,
and you got to be making proper decisions.
What was it about Gilda?
Something awfully special. She was adorable. That goes without saying, but she loved to laugh more than anything else, she could get laughing so hard that she couldn't breathe, and then she would say, "I think I peed my pants," which is what she strove for. She wanted to laugh that hard, and she could make us laugh harder than you could imagine. And she was a good person underneath too.
Yeah,
that came through in her comedy.
So back to Letterman, what was the mix there that made you guys work?
Well, I don't know. He certainly was generous with me and encouraging. And although when I was hired, the producer said a number of times, "Are you the kind of guy who Dave could play off? Could he play his comedy off you? Could you play straight?" And I was saying, absolutely, yes. But the show wasn't really designed for that. He would introduce me. I'd take a bow. He'd go right on with the show, and I'm just there, I haven't lost that drive, saying, I've got to, next time he introduces me, I got to say something, which I tried to do this one show, and my microphone wasn't even on. Well, I had to go to the
Sometimes
sound
Mike
engineer.
turns mine off.
Sound engineer. We had a woman on sound. She was absolutely fantastic. What a sound she got on the band. But when I went to her to say, I tried to speak last time, my mic was, she said, "I don't think they want it on." Well, then I had to go to the producer. My mic, no, we want it on. Well, I had to get that straightened out. It was a little misunderstanding. Finally, when I spoke, and I don't remember exactly what, probably some Vegas-y thing, I started off just by quoting things that I'd heard Sammy Davis say.
That's great.
On his talk show and stuff that I always wanted to say. People somehow got it and found it funny, and Dave Letterman said that was funny, do more of that. And then he eventually said, "Okay, now let's just try to have a conversation. Let's, instead of planning some Sammy thing, which are great, don't get me wrong, but let's just see what happens. Try to talk." And then, incredibly supportive of him to do that. And I found that I could talk back, go up against him almost, because it's almost like a duel every night.
With very different energies. He's the Midwest, quieter guy, a little bit subdued, and you're showbiz guy.
Yes, I took on that persona, but really I'm a Jew from Canada. But I guess I took on this persona that kind of worked, and it was the opposite of his persona, wasn't it? There were times when he knew exactly what I was talking about. I'd get into some Sammy Davis lore or something. He would know what I was talking about, but he kind of had to pretend he didn't, because, well, how would he, a guy from the Midwest, possibly know about this time that Jilly took Sammy, and Dean over to, for a drink? You're not supposed to know that.
Right. But he was he was a huge music fan. I mean, he really broke acts on that show. Did you guys talk about the bands you'd have on, who was hot, who was gonna hit, who wasn't?
He had his own taste in music, and was way more musical than anybody would have thought. He heard every single note that I heard. That I played, He heard every note that we played and was conscious of it. And there was a period of time when he certainly, jazz, a fascination of mine. He may have thought, not really much ratings in jazz.
Right.
But I was always trying to, sneak in a little bit of jazz. And I'm telling you, he heard every single, well, what is that? He would just say, what was that? What are you talking about, Dave? That weird lick Dave Letterman talking about a lick? He heard every single thing. And now he loves jazz again.
Well, you brought a lot of musicians in and introduced them to a wider audience, like David Sanborn we were talking about.
Certainly, there was more latitude to do that in the early days when we were on 1230. We could almost do anything. The feeling was, nobody's watching. What does it matter? But we certainly were a lot, I think, more creative in those early days with that attitude. Nobody's watching.
Listening to your memoir, you were talking about some of the stunts that like Dave would put on a suit of Alka-Seltzer
Right.
and jump into a giant tank that statesman entertainer Dave Letterman wouldn't have done maybe in the later years.
Yeah, maybe so. And he had the suit of Velcro too.
That's right.
He could
And
just-
throwing watermelons off the building and filming. That was
Well, that he would do. That he continued to do.
yeah.
But yeah, I guess, one has to be age appropriate, I guess, I used to dress like Doc Severinsen, and somehow, even though I stopped, 20 years left to go, but people never forgot it. And the writers would always wear, so Paul's wearing one of his usual loud jackets, and I haven't worn a jacket like that in 20 years. It
Right.
didn't matter.
So do you think at the beginning, well, I guess the question, the big thing that happened in the middle was that Johnny retires. And so the 11:30 slot's open. And Dave wants that. And I've read Bill
Right.
Carter's Night Shift and all the books
Yes.
about the whole thing. And I remember thinking like, but he's his own thing. And to my generation, he was Johnny to us, just like Johnny was Johnny to him. And I was like, you don't need that slot. You're your own thing. Was there a consciousness of that on the show that you guys had created something separate from what late night had been?
My recollection is that Dave Letterman just idolized Johnny Carson.
Right.
Only problem is, so did Leno. but these guys, that's what they wanted. If I could take over for Johnny, that's what it was. That was David's dream. And so that's why, he was hurt when he got passed over for that, but was able to go and do his own show on Channel 2, and, everything worked out okay.
Channel 2. That was the CBS affiliate here in New York.
Well, normally it's Channel. It is in New York. I think it is in Buffalo, New York.
Yeah.
Channel 2. And NBC is often Channel 4. I'm talking about the old days when there was a thing called television.
Yes.
They're gone. Those days are gone.
I seem to
This
remember.
is replaced. We've replaced television with what we're doing now.
Well, what do you think of where we've been in entertainment in the last, 10 years? Social media. Are you an Instagram guy? Are you on the apps?
Yes. Well, I've got a lovely assistant named Olivia who helps me with who do Instagram. I wouldn't be able to figure it out myself. But yes, I have an Instagram account. I have made a few musical videos on there for your edification.
Are you interested in figuring out new technology or?
No, it scares me. Just like everybody else of my generation. And
did you use technology for music production as as things change as you were growing into your middle adulthood?
I just find that I can't feel it like a kid of today can. Kid of today, has got his drum program up and finds a beat that kills him. It's just not going to kill me like if I heard a real drummer playing it.
Right.
I just think that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
The great David Foster, also Canadian, but a wonderful record producer of Celine Dion and Josh Groban and everybody else. Well, he was telling me, and this conversation goes back some 20 years, telling me about how he's glad he can make classic albums and Christmas albums and things like he's doing now, and the Great American Songbook. He says, because the stuff today, he says, we just can't. I said, we can't feel it, right? He says, oh, we can feel it. He said, we can't do it.
Oh, that's interesting.
This generation.
But there's a connection between the feeling it makes you want to do it and vice versa. I mean, I'm forcing myself, and I'm not a young man. I'm a generation below you, but I'm on the older side. I actually even worked at Facebook, but I'm trying to use Instagram to communicate my comedy or say funny things. It's not intuitive to me, and it really is an effort to try to figure out. Well, this is a blank slate, and I want to treat it like a blank slate. I just don't naturally know what to do with it.
Technology changes the art. It always has and always will. And certainly, attention spans are short. TikTok is 15 seconds or something. I guess you got to make a comedic point in
Very quick.
in 15 seconds.
In 3
now.
seconds.
Yeah.
You have to capture the audience's attention with visuals, which is why there's so many beautiful women dancing scantily clad, or with some kind of really
music,
really impactful thing, to capture that attention, because
Well,
they're
there's
just going to do
another
this.
reason, though, why there's beautiful dancers on stage now. By the way, which they were doing in Las Vegas in the 50s.
Sure.
Anne Margaret had boy dance. When I look at rock and roll now, I say it's Anne Margaret's act. But the fact is, there's no musicians on stage to watch anymore. You got to have something. So now you have dancers, backup dancers.
Do you follow modern music? And if so, who's intriguing to you?
I don't say I can't say I follow it. No, I just decided this stuff is not made for me. I'm still listening to the same 10 records that I was when I was 17 and hearing new things in them, as you said. But you can't ignore Sabrina Carpenter. She's just infectious and she's everywhere. Mm-hmm. I'm crazy about her records.
Do your kids play music?
Yes, they do. Neither of them turned out to be in music, though. Son is a second-year medical student, and I'm saying, where did I go wrong? And my daughter does.
Hey, baby, we're all here today. It's going to be a hip exam that we're going to have.
All I wanted was a degenerate jazz musician, and he's a medical student. And my daughter does full-time dog rescue in L.A. So they're both musical, but they didn't go into music.
Well, maybe they'll turn out okay, even if they're contributing to the world in different ways.
Let's hope so.
Yeah.
Let's hope so. Not everybody can be.
All right. I wanted to share some things that I learned about you that didn't surprise me so much as you start to think about it, but were very interesting, because you've been in so many places with so many people, playing with so many different people. Paul Shaffer played on the song Goodbye to You by Scandal with Patti Smythe.
Yes.
Which anybody over 48 knew by heart.
Great. Yes, and I was in Scandal for a while.
You were officially in the band.
Yeah. A clever guy named Zach Smith put this band together. He had a couple of songs. He had a singer who wasn't Patti Smythe first, who he wrote a few songs with. Then Patti came in. I was a keyboard player. And that Goodbye to You, I'm trying to remember when that came on the scene. I think it was part of our repertoire.
It had to
before
be like 84?
Before, yeah, but we were a band like 81.
So you were already doing Letterman and you're playing?
No, I was in Scandal first.
Oh, okay.
And then the Letterman job came along. But I had been in a major car accident in 1981.
Oh, right, yeah.
Broke all my ribs and stuff.
In Hawaii.
And so I was doing Scandal, but when Letterman came along, I would have done both. I would have just done that and stayed in the band, but I had to pick. I didn't have the energy. I had lost so much blood and stuff. Didn't have the energy to do both and recover from the accident. So I had to leave Scandal, but still, they brought me into, when they got their record deal, to play that solo. And they had a wonderful producer, whose name escapes me now, but he worked with me on that, on putting the solo together. And he said, let's work in the area of Del Shannon and Runaway. Well, a song I grew up on. And the two of us related on that. We put that solo together, the two of us.
That's very cool. You played keyboards with the Honey Drippers, Robert Plant's
that's right, his
project, and played on Sea of Love, which was a top hit.
Yes, Sea of Love, and then the other one was the follow-up, Good Rockin' at Midnight. And that was, as a studio player, we subscribed to a booking service called Radio Registry, a term that dates back to the year Gimmel.
So a studio could look, guitarist, keyboardist, drummer.
A producer might say, I need a band. I'm cutting Patti Smythe. I need drums. Give me such and such on drum, but you can't get him. Here's a second choice, and that's how they would book bands.
Interesting.
And I just got a call. Hello, Paul's Registry. We've got 2 dates, Saturday and Sunday. It's 12 to 6 each day. Is Robert Plant. And who? Robert Plant. Sure. And I didn't know what it was going to be, but it was just booked that way. and turned out to be the Honey Drippers.
Which was, how do you describe that? That was sort of revisiting 50s type of music?
Yeah, it was Robert Plant and his mentor, the founder of Atlantic, the late great Ahmet Ertegun.
Yeah.
They decided, let's get it, do like a mystery band thing, and we get whoever's kind of in town, and we do oldies from the 50s, blues and things like that. And that was the idea. So somehow Jeff Beck was in town.
Oh, how cool.
And so he played this afternoon, and Nile Rodgers was producing Jeff Beck, so he played. So those were our two guitars.
Pretty good.
And then the rest of us were studio players. Me, late Wayne Peswater on bass, and a great jazz drummer whose name will come back to me. He moved to the West Coast. And Ahmet producing. And then they took these tracks. They went to London. They had more sessions in London. They put Jimmy Page on. Sea of Love was Jimmy Page solo, all overdubbed in England.
I didn't know that. So this was both one of those super groups, but also the first manifestation of Robert Plant reinventing himself and showing that he can sing way more than just howling heavy metal music.
Well, I guess so. You know, the thing I found interesting was that it was a hit and it was a moneymaker. And he did. I went once to a show of his, probably at the Meadowlands or whatever it's called now, to sit in because he was going to do a little Honey Drippers at the end of his solo show. But other than things like that, and he did Saturday Night Live once at Christmas time as the Honey Drippers that I did with him. Brian Setzer on guitar that time.
Oh, cool.
Because again, the idea was whoever happens to be around, you know. But he never would do it again. They went, let's do Honey Drippers 2, you know, Ahmet especially, Honey Drippers 2. It's a natural. No,
Right.
I want to keep going. I don't want to go back.
A bit like the Wilburys' second record or whatever.
Right. He didn't want to do another Honey Drippers. He wanted to keep expanding, and I respected that.
Yeah. Okay, you co-wrote this was, I love this. It's Raining Men.
Yeah.
That one surprised me.
Well, my accountant agrees with you.
It keeps being played.
It's the most amazing. Yes, it's got legs, and it's just really wonderful to have co-written a song like that. My co-author was a brilliant genius named Paul Jabara, a flamboyant gentleman, if I may use that term, who wrote. Well, I started working with him as an arranger. He was going to be an artist first, and he had a song that he had written called "One Man Ain't Enough." So he was already sort of dealing with those comedic, gender fluid type of comedic veins. So I did, and Ron Dante was a producer that I used to work for a lot. He was Barry Manilow's first producer, produced the early stuff, including I Write the Songs. But I played on a lot of Manilow stuff,
Oh, you did?
Thanks to Ron Dante.
Those original recordings?
I played on such things as Ready to Take a Chance Again, theme from Foul Play.
Oh, with Chevy Chase and Goldie Hawn.
Yeah, one was called Somewhere in the Night that I played for him, and a few things like that.
That's amazing.
One called Boogie Woogie, like a Boogie Boogie Bugle Boy type of thing that he used to do. Yes. So Ron said, I got this artist, Paul Jabbar. The record was cute, but didn't go anywhere. And then Paul Jabbar moved to L.A., and he wrote Last Dance, and he won an Oscar with Donna Summer singing it.
Right.
And when he came back to New York, he called me up and he said, I got a title for Donna. Donna Summer was a good friend of his. Her career had cooled a little bit since Last Dance. He said, I want to bring her back with this title. What do you think of this title? And I want to write this one with you, he said, because you were did a great job with me on One Man Ain't Enough. What do you think about a title? It's Raining Men. I said, I'll be right over. Donna was, and he was very much aware. Her core audience was the gay club audience. So he said, let's just give them, it's Raining Men, give them what they want. And he was all ready to go with lyrics. He had phrases like, he says, I want to say, rip off the roof and stay in bed, And he just needed me to play the piano, put some music to it all, and that's how it came about.
That's so funny. You're everywhere, man. That's the thing.
Well, I'm old. I've been around so long. It's hilarious.
Yeah.
I can't believe it.
Is there anybody you've played that you haven't played with?
Well, of course, so many of the new artists that I would love to play. I mean, I don't follow it, but you got to be aware of a voice like Ariana Grande and stuff,
Yeah.
No, I don't think I've
Maybe
played.
Steven Schwartz can put you in touch with her.
Well,
people.
hey, I got an in with her now.
Yeah, there you go.
But I have played for Miley Cyrus a number of times. She's terrific.
Yeah.
I always say, though, I missed Elvis and I missed Sinatra.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I did pretty well, though. Yeah. I mean, I played for Sammy. I played for...
That's so cool. Did you ever have any trouble handling success?
Well, I think that it's very easy to get carried away. And certainly, I was working right away. I got to New York, I started working right away. That I was already successful. And when I look back at my days playing on other people's records, that may have been some of the most fun. When you just come into the studio, you don't know what they're going to put in front of you. Sometimes it's challenging. Sometimes you can barely play it because reading music was never my forte. But boy, I had to learn fast how to read. And it's very exciting times. And yeah, there's a tendency to say, well, I'm hot shit now.
Yeah.
Cash My You just played on Manilow's thing. Hey, how about that? And yes, one can be guilty of that. But something comes along to take you down, crashing down to earth pretty quickly. I've found that.
And you remember that you're just a young Orthodox kid from Thunder Bay.
I was a little sheltered, for sure. It took me a while to learn things about life. I think maybe coming from, I don't know what it was. Maybe that isolated town of Thunder Bay. I don't know. But you certainly, drop a kid into a New York recording session, and you better learn fast.
Yeah. All right, let's play fill in the blank real quick, and then I'll let you go.
Well, this has been a gas, but yes,
thanks,
let's
man.
go.
Thanks. The most fun I've ever had in my career is blank.
Well, I think I just said it.
You did just say
my
it,
years as a studio cat in New York. That was the most fun.
Because you were new and it was all just kind of blossoming in front of you?
Because somebody was hiring me based just on my musicianship. Mm-hmm. Taking a chance on me, and you got to come through, so that at the end of the session, you got a take, Sometimes you didn't get a take. You don't want that to happen.
And you felt like you're earning your place among a very...
Somebody respects my musicianship. I think that's what really made me feel good about my ego, massage my ego a little bit there.
It's one thing to be a great piano player in a small town, but here in New York City, among all the greats...
One would never have thought. And, thinking about how I got to do a Burt Bacharach album while still doing the Magic Show, I think. It's one of those connection things, and this is a guy I always dreamed about. I still love his music, there I was in the studio. And he's talking about how his wife, Angie Dickinson, I think might win the Emmy this year for Policewoman.
He's like, I've heard of her.
I'll never forget it.
Did you meet her back then?
She wasn't around now.
No. Oh, that's cool. All right. My favorite comedian of all time is...
Oh, gee, that's a good one. There are so many.
And a lot of them, like some of the greats.
Yeah, I mean, impossible to name. I mean, I've got to say David Letterman because I know so much about him. I worked with him every single night. I know, I would see him before the show. I would see what kind of mood he was in. I would see what happened to that mood. Usually nothing. His bad mood would continue right on to the show. But, watching him work night after night, I can't see anybody doing it any better. Yet again, he idolized Carson. And when I see Carson, I see what he meant. That was class.
What do you think he meant?
I think it has something to do with the class that Carson had and with the fact that he was unfrazzled and he could make anything work. the worst guest could become the funniest in his hands, and David tried to do the same thing. When I think back of Robin Williams, when I think of the days when he would be booked on the show, I'd be happy from breakfast time. We got Robin, we don't have to worry about a thing. That was the kind of confidence.
You just wind him up and let him go out there.
Yeah, you knew you were going to be laughing and enjoying it, and the show was going to be a hit.
Did anybody bust up the band more than Robin Williams?
Oh, I don't know. Sure, I can't really think of any examples, except that I remember when Gallagher came on, in the rehearsal, he was working to the band right away, trying to crack up the band right away, even in the rehearsal. He knew where his fans were.
Smashing melons.
He knew the guys who had smoked a joint before the show.
Oh, hilarious. Okay, here's another one. I am happiest when I am blank.
Oh, I think playing piano, certainly. I mentioned that wonderful memorial to David Sanborn, the great saxophonist who used to join me every week in the early days of Letterman, play every Friday night with my band. And we lost him about 2 years ago. And the musicians that came together, people that I've known for 30, 40 years were back, maybe even more, to play in honor of David. It was really something. And there we all were playing together again. I was, missing David, of course, and it was bittersweet, but musically, pretty incredible.
You just feel like you're in your place, or you just lose consciousness on some level when you're playing?
I think one tries to. You got to try to keep intellect out of it. Try to, lessen that space between what you feel and what you can play. You don't want any space, and you certainly don't want to be thinking. Trying not to be thinking.
Last question. What I want for my kids is blank.
Oh, my goodness. Well, world peace comes to mind right away. When I was a kid, it always seemed so corny to wish for that. But with what we have gone through and continue to go through, boy, I certainly hope I'm not leaving my kids a world that is impossible for them to deal with. So we want peace on earth, goodwill towards men, and happiness. That's what I want for my kid. Health and happiness.
God bless us, everyone.
Paul, a pleasure.
Paul Shaffer, ladies and
Thank
gentlemen.
you all.
What an honor.
What an honor.
Thank
You've been
you
a
so
beautiful
much.
audience. Thank you.
Good night. See you tomorrow.
Thank you. Good night.